Sometimes a child picks up something small and accidentally uncovers a secret that adults spent years trying to forget. The Whitmore Children's Foundation Gala sparkled beneath towering crystal chandeliers in downtown Chicago. Wealth and influence filled every corner of the grand ballroom. Luxury gowns shimmered beneath golden light. Crystal glasses reflected elegant centerpieces. Soft music drifted through the room while guests discussed charitable donations, business ventures, and social events. At the edge of the ballroom, Emma Collins moved quietly between tables carrying trays and checking guest requests. At 29 years old, she had mastered the art of becoming invisible when necessary. As a waitress, she understood that most people noticed the service only when something went wrong. Tonight, she was simply grateful for the extra shift. Every additional dollar mattered, especially with a 4-year-old son to raise. Noah Collins sat patiently at a small table near the staff section, coloring on the back of a folded event program. Emma checked on him every few minutes. She had no family available that evening and could not afford a babysitter. Fortunately, the event coordinator had agreed to let Noah stay nearby as long as he remained quiet. Noah had inherited his mother's bright blue eyes and endless curiosity. He was usually well behaved. Unfortunately, curiosity often moved faster than caution. Across the ballroom, guests began gathering around a stage where the evening's charity auction would soon begin. Volunteers arranged display items while staff prepared auction materials. Among the honored guests seated near the front were billionaire businessman William Carter and his wife Victoria Carter. Their presence attracted attention wherever they went. Cameras occasionally flashed as guests greeted them. Victoria smiled politely while accepting compliments, but her attention seemed elsewhere. She appeared distracted, thoughtful, as though carrying memories she rarely shared. Meanwhile, Noah had become fascinated by the preparations near the stage. Large numbered paddles rested beside several tables waiting for the auction to begin. To a 4-year-old boy, they looked less like fundraising tools and more like oversized toys. Before Emma noticed, Noah quietly wandered several feet from his chair. He never intended to cause trouble. He was simply exploring. As he passed one of the VIP tables, something caught his eye beneath a chair. A paddle had slipped to the floor unnoticed. Noah bent down and picked it up. The wooden handle fit perfectly into his small hand. He examined the large number printed on the front. Then he smiled. To him, it looked like a sign from a parade. Across the room, the auction host stepped onto the stage. Guests began taking their seats. Noah innocently lifted the paddle into the air. The movement instantly attracted attention. Several nearby guests chuckled at the sight of a small child holding an auction paddle larger than his arm. Emma turned and immediately spotted him. "Noah," she called gently. "Bring that back, sweetheart." Noah looked toward her and grinned proudly. But before he could move, Victoria Carter's eyes landed on the paddle. The smile disappeared from her face. Her expression changed so suddenly that William noticed immediately. Color drained from her cheeks. Her eyes widened. She stared not at Noah himself, but at something attached to the back of the paddle. A small engraved symbol almost hidden beneath the handle. For a moment, Victoria seemed unable to breathe. The noise of the ballroom faded around her. The years disappeared. Memories she had buried long ago came rushing back all at once. Across the room, Noah continued holding the paddle without understanding why a billionaire's wife suddenly looked as though she had seen a ghost. Victoria Carter could not take her eyes off the auction paddle. Around her, the ballroom continued moving as if nothing unusual had happened. Guests settled into their seats. The auction host adjusted his microphone. Waiters carried trays of sparkling water and coffee between tables. Yet for Victoria, the evening had suddenly divided into two parts. The moment before she saw the symbol, and the moment after. William noticed the change immediately. After 20 years of marriage, he could read even the smallest shifts in her expression. "Victoria," he asked quietly. She did not answer right away. Her attention remained fixed on Noah. More specifically, on the paddle still resting in the child's hands. The engraved symbol hidden beneath the handle was not something ordinary guests would recognize. Most people never even noticed it. It had not appeared on auction paddles for years. Victoria swallowed hard. Memories she rarely allowed herself to revisit began surfacing one by one. Across the ballroom, Emma finally reached Noah and gently took the paddle from him. "I am sorry," she whispered to nearby guests. "He was only curious." Noah lowered his head slightly. I was not trying to get in trouble. Emma smiled and brushed a hand through his blonde hair. I know you were not. The simple exchange should have ended the situation. Yet Victoria continued staring. Something else had caught her attention now. Hanging around Noah's neck beneath his small button-down shirt was a silver chain. Most of it remained hidden. Only a tiny section was visible, but it was enough. Victoria felt her heart begin to race. William followed her gaze. What is it? He asked again. This time she answered. I do not know. The response surprised even her. Because deep down, she feared she did know. Emma guided Noah back toward the staff section. The little boy quickly forgot the paddle and returned to coloring on the event program. Children moved on easily. Adults rarely did. Victoria watched them from across the room. The more she looked at Noah, the more uneasy she became. There was something familiar about him. Not just the necklace. Not just the symbol on the paddle. Something in the shape of his smile. Something in his eyes. She hated herself for thinking it. Because the possibility felt impossible. Years ago, her younger brother Benjamin had walked away from the Carter family after a painful disagreement. Time had passed. Phone calls became less frequent. Then they stopped entirely. Eventually, nobody knew where Benjamin had gone. Victoria had spent years convincing herself that chapter of her life was closed. Yet the symbol engraved on the paddle belonged to him. Or rather, it belonged to a private charitable project Benjamin had helped create before he disappeared. Only a handful of people knew it existed. William leaned closer. You look pale. Victoria managed a weak smile. I am fine. But she was not fine. Not even close. Her attention shifted once again toward Noah. At that exact moment, the boy reached beneath his shirt and pulled out the silver pendant hanging from his chain. He was simply playing with it while he colored. He had no idea anyone was watching. The pendant slipped into the light. Victoria froze. The room seemed to disappear around her. The pendant carried the exact same symbol engraved on the auction paddle. The exact same symbol Benjamin had once worn every day. Her breathing stopped for a moment. Her eyes widened. Across the ballroom, Emma noticed Victoria staring. Their eyes met briefly. Emma looked confused. Victoria looked terrified. Because for the first time in years, she was beginning to wonder whether the past she believed was gone had somehow found its way back into her life. Victoria Carter spent the next several minutes pretending to listen to conversations she could barely hear. Around her, guests applauded as the auction host introduced the evening's first item. Numbers flashed across large display screens. Bidding paddles lifted throughout the ballroom. Laughter rose and fell between tables. The charity event continued exactly as planned. Yet Victoria's thoughts remained fixed on a little boy sitting near the staff section. William noticed her distraction becoming impossible to hide. This is about the child, is it not? He asked quietly. Victoria hesitated before nodding. There is something I cannot explain. William followed her gaze toward Noah. The boy was now happily drawing airplanes across the back of the event program. His silver pendant occasionally slipped into view whenever he leaned forward. Victoria looked away for a moment. The memories were becoming overwhelming. Years earlier, before wealth and business responsibilities had consumed everyone's attention, Benjamin had been the most adventurous member of the Carter family. He cared little about status, little about expectations. He preferred helping people to impressing them. He volunteered at shelters, supported small charities, donated quietly without telling anyone. The symbol engraved on Noah's pendant had been Benjamin's personal emblem. A simple design he created while working on a youth mentorship project. It had never been mass-produced, never sold, never shared publicly. Very few people even knew it existed, which made Noah's pendant impossible to ignore. Victoria suddenly stood from her chair. William looked surprised. Where are you going? She exhaled slowly. I need to know if I am imagining this. Without waiting for a response, she began walking across the ballroom. Emma noticed immediately. Throughout the evening, she had caught Victoria looking at Noah several times. It made her uneasy, not because Victoria seemed hostile, because she seemed frightened. As Victoria approached, Emma instinctively moved closer to her son. Noah looked up from his drawing and smiled. Hi. Victoria managed a small smile in return. Up close, the resemblance felt even stronger. Not because Noah looked exactly like Benjamin. He did not. But there were traces, small details, familiar expressions. Pieces of the past reflected in a face that belonged to the future. Victoria knelt slightly so she could speak at eye level. That is a very nice necklace. Noah immediately grabbed the pendant. My dad gave it to me. The answer landed harder than she expected. Emma's expression tightened slightly. She clearly did not enjoy discussing the subject. Victoria noticed and immediately softened her tone. I am sorry. I did not mean to be intrusive. Emma offered a polite nod. It is okay. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Victoria glanced toward the pendant again. May I ask where it came from? Emma hesitated. The question seemed innocent enough. Yet something about it felt important. It belonged to his father. Victoria's heartbeat quickened. And his father? Emma lowered her eyes briefly. The familiar sadness appeared again. Passed away several years ago. Victoria swallowed hard. The answer matched another piece of a puzzle she desperately wanted to reject. Yet every detail kept fitting. Noah, completely unaware of the emotional weight surrounding him, proudly held up his drawing. Look! Victoria looked down. The page showed a child standing beside a small airplane. Her breath caught. Benjamin had loved airplanes. Emma smiled at her son's artwork. He draws them all the time. Victoria stared at the sketch, then at Noah, then at the pendant resting against his shirt. Deep inside, a possibility she had spent years believing impossible was beginning to feel frighteningly real. And for the first time that evening, she realized there was only one question left that truly mattered. She needed to know the name of Noah's father. Victoria Carter stood motionless beside the small table. Around her, the charity auction continued gathering momentum. Applause echoed through the ballroom as another item sold for an impressive donation. Numbers flashed across large screens. Guests raised paddles. Laughter drifted between tables. Yet none of it seemed real anymore. Her entire focus had narrowed to the child sitting in front of her and the questions she could no longer ignore. Emma sensed the change immediately. Victoria was no longer making casual conversation. There was something deeper behind her eyes now. Something urgent. Noah continued coloring, blissfully unaware of the emotional storm building around him. He added another airplane to his drawing and smiled proudly at his work. Victoria looked at the sketch, then at the silver pendant, then back at Emma. Every piece seemed connected to a memory she had spent years trying to bury. Your son likes airplanes, Victoria said softly. Emma smiled. Ever since he was little. The answer almost made Victoria laugh. Benjamin had been exactly the same. As a boy, he covered notebooks with airplane drawings. As an adult, he spent weekends visiting small airfields whenever he could. The similarities were becoming impossible to dismiss. William had quietly approached during the conversation. He stood a short distance away, sensing that something important was unfolding. Victoria finally gathered enough courage to ask the question that had been growing inside her all evening. Emma, she said carefully, may I ask something personal? Emma hesitated but nodded. Victoria glanced briefly at Noah before lowering her voice. Who was his father? The question seemed simple. Yet Emma's expression changed immediately. The warmth in her smile faded. Not because she was offended, because the question touched a place she rarely allowed anyone to reach. For a moment, she looked toward Noah, then toward the ballroom, as though deciding whether to answer. Victoria noticed the hesitation and immediately regretted asking. You do not have to tell me, she said gently. I am sorry if I crossed a line. Emma shook her head. No, it is okay. Her voice carried the calm strength of someone who had lived with loss long enough to stop fighting it. Several seconds passed. Victoria waited quietly. William remained silent beside her. Finally, Emma spoke. His father was a good man. The answer was simple, but the emotion behind it was unmistakable. Noah looked up from his drawing. My dad liked airplanes too. The comment made Victoria's heart skip. Emma smiled softly at her son. Yes, he did. The ballroom noise seemed to fade again. Victoria felt as though she were standing on the edge of a truth she was afraid to hear. Yet she needed to hear it. Needed it more than she wanted to admit. What was his name? She asked quietly. Emma lowered her eyes. The answer did not come immediately. Years of memories seemed to pass through her expression. Then she finally spoke. Benjamin Carter. The world stopped. At least it felt that way. Victoria stared at her in complete silence. William's face drained of color. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Noah continued drawing, unaware that he had just changed everything. Victoria felt her knees weaken. The name echoed through her mind. Benjamin Carter. Her younger brother. The brother who had vanished from the family's life years ago. The brother she had never stopped missing. Tears immediately filled her eyes. Emma looked startled by the reaction. "Are you all right?" she asked. Victoria could barely answer. Her voice trembled. "Benjamin was my brother." Emma froze. The words hung between them. Across the ballroom, guests continued bidding on auction items, completely unaware that a family separated by years of silence had just discovered each other in the middle of a charity gala. For several seconds, nobody moved. The words seemed too large for the moment that contained them. "Benjamin was my brother." Victoria's voice still echoed between them. Emma stared at her in disbelief. William remained silent beside his wife, trying to process what he had just heard. Across the ballroom, the charity auction continued as though nothing extraordinary had happened. A new item appeared on stage. Guests raised paddles. Applause followed another successful bid. Yet for the 4 people standing near the staff section, the evening had changed forever. Noah looked up from his drawing and glanced between the adults. "Mom?" he asked quietly. Emma immediately knelt beside him. Her hand found his shoulder instinctively. The gesture was not protective because she felt threatened. It was protective because everything suddenly felt uncertain. Victoria noticed. "I am sorry," she said softly. "I know this must be overwhelming." Emma searched her face. There was no arrogance there. No entitlement. Only shock. And something else. Grief. The kind of grief that never fully disappears. William finally spoke. "Benjamin never told us he had a family." Emma lowered her eyes. "He planned to." The answer came gently. "He talked about it often." Victoria felt tears return. That sounded exactly like her brother. Benjamin had always believed there would be more time, more opportunities, more chances to make things right. Emma glanced toward Noah. He wanted Noah to know his family. The statement carried no accusation. Yet both Victoria and William felt its weight. Years had passed. Opportunities had vanished. The family Benjamin wanted his son to know had never known the child existed. Noah looked at Victoria curiously. "You knew my dad?" Victoria smiled through tears. "Yes." The answer was barely audible. "I knew him very well." Noah seemed satisfied by that. Children accepted remarkable truths with surprising ease. He returned to his drawing and added another airplane to the page. Victoria watched him for a moment. Then she noticed something she had missed earlier. The way he held the crayon. Benjamin had held pencils exactly the same way. Such a tiny detail. Yet somehow it felt more convincing than any photograph. Emma reached into her apron pocket and removed a worn photograph she carried every day. The edges had softened with age. She looked at it briefly before handing it to Victoria. Victoria's hands trembled as she accepted it. The image showed a smiling young Benjamin standing beside Emma near a lakeside dock. His arm rested around her shoulders. Both were laughing at something beyond the camera. It was not a formal picture. It was a real moment. A happy moment. William looked over her shoulder and immediately recognized it. The photograph captured the version of Benjamin they remembered best. Kind, relaxed, full of hope. Victoria gently touched the corner of the image. "I have not seen this photograph before." Emma smiled sadly. "He gave it to me." Victoria stared at the picture for a long moment. Then she looked toward Noah. Suddenly she understood why the pendant existed, why the airplane drawings existed, why the resemblance had struck her so deeply. Benjamin had never truly disappeared. Pieces of him were sitting right in front of her. William looked at Noah and felt something shift inside him as well. Until tonight, the child had been a stranger. Now he could not stop seeing family. The same blue eyes, the same curiosity, the same gentle spirit. Victoria carefully returned the photograph. Her voice trembled when she finally spoke. "There is something you deserve to see." Emma looked confused. Victoria reached into her purse. Slowly, she removed an old folded photograph she had carried for years. The moment she opened it, Emma's eyes widened. Because the child smiling beside a young Benjamin looked exactly like Noah. Emma stared at the photograph in complete silence. The image was old enough that the colors had begun to fade, yet the resemblance was unmistakable. A young Benjamin stood beside a smiling child at a family picnic nearly 25 years earlier. The boy in the picture was one of Victoria's younger cousins. Yet what stopped Emma cold was not who the child was. It was how much that child looked like Noah. The same bright eyes, the same smile, even the same slight tilt of the head. For a moment, the ballroom seemed to disappear around her. She looked from the photograph to Noah, then back to the photograph. Her heart felt unsteady. Victoria understood immediately. She had experienced the same shock only minutes earlier. "That was the moment I knew I was not imagining things," she said softly. William nodded. I saw it too. Noah climbed down from his chair and walked closer. Can I see? Victoria smiled and handed him the photograph. The little boy studied it carefully. He looks like me. The simple observation made everyone smile through their emotions. Children often recognize truths that adults complicated. Noah pointed toward Benjamin in the picture. That is my dad. Emma gently brushed a hand across her son's hair. Yes, sweetheart. Noah continued studying the image. He looks happy. Victoria swallowed hard. He usually was. The answer came before she realized she had spoken. Hearing herself talk about Benjamin in the present tense brought an unexpected ache to her chest. Years had passed, yet part of her still expected him to walk through a doorway with another impossible idea and a smile on his face. William looked toward Emma. Did he ever talk about us? Emma nodded. All the time. Victoria blinked back tears. Emma smiled faintly at the memory. He told Noah stories before he was even born. Stories about growing up with his sister. Stories about family vacations. Stories about learning to ride bicycles. Victoria laughed softly through her tears. He never learned properly. Emma looked surprised. What? William smiled for the first time that evening. Benjamin crashed into a mailbox the first day. Victoria laughed again. The sound felt strange and comforting at the same time. Twice. Noah laughed, even though he did not fully understand the story. Around them, the gala continued, but none of them noticed anymore. They had become their own small island inside the crowded ballroom. Emma watched Victoria and William carefully. She had spent years imagining what Benjamin's family might be like. She expected judgment, questions, suspicion. Instead, she found warmth, humanity, loss that mirrored her own. Victoria reached into her purse again. This time she removed a small velvet pouch. She held it carefully for several seconds before opening it. Inside was a silver pin engraved with the same symbol that appeared on Noah's pendant and the auction paddle. Emma immediately recognized it. The symbol. Victoria nodded. Benjamin designed it when he was 23. Noah looked fascinated. What does it mean? Victoria smiled. It was his idea for helping people find opportunities. Noah considered that carefully. That sounds nice. William laughed softly. It does. Victoria handed the pin to Noah. The little boy examined it beside his pendant. The symbols matched perfectly. Emma felt tears gathering again. There were simply too many connections now. Too many pieces fitting together. William looked toward Victoria, then toward Noah. Finally, he spoke the thought both of them had been avoiding. There is no doubt anymore. Victoria nodded slowly. Her eyes never left the child. No. Her voice trembled. There is not. And for the first time since Benjamin disappeared from their lives, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. Not certainty, not closure, something far more precious. Family. The realization settled over them slowly, carrying a weight that none of them could fully describe. Family. The word seemed almost too small for what had happened. For years, Emma had believed Noah's connection to Benjamin existed only in memories, photographs, and stories. Now, sitting in the middle of a crowded ballroom, she was watching those memories come alive in the faces of people who had loved him long before she met him. Noah sat between Victoria and William, carefully comparing the silver pin to the symbol on his pendant. His concentration was absolute. Every few seconds he looked up with another question. Did my dad make both of these? Victoria smiled warmly. Yes, he did. Noah grinned. That is cool. The simplicity of his reaction made everyone laugh softly. Children had a remarkable ability to step around complicated emotions and find the heart of a moment. Emma watched quietly. The scene unfolding before her felt almost unreal. Yet nothing about it felt forced. There was no dramatic confrontation. No demand for explanations. Only people slowly reconnecting pieces of a life they had all lost in different ways. William sat down beside Noah. For the first time that evening, he stopped thinking like a businessman and simply listened. Noah immediately held up his drawing. Do you like airplanes too? William examined the page carefully. I do. Noah pointed toward one of the airplanes he had drawn larger than the others. This one goes really far. William smiled. Your father used to say that too. Noah's eyes widened. Really? William nodded. Whenever he talked about flying, he always wanted to go farther than everyone else. Victoria laughed softly. That sounds exactly like Benjamin. Emma listened to the stories with growing emotion. Each memory filled in another piece of the father Noah would never fully remember himself. Benjamin had always wanted his son to know who he was. Tonight, somehow, that wish was being granted. Across the ballroom, a few guests had begun noticing the unusually emotional gathering near the staff section. Quiet whispers spread between tables. Nobody knew the full story, but people sensed something meaningful was taking place. The charity auction continued in the background, yet it felt increasingly distant. Victoria reached into her purse one more time. This time she removed a folded letter protected inside a clear sleeve. The paper had aged slightly over the years. Emma immediately noticed how carefully it had been preserved. Victoria looked at it for a long moment before speaking. "Benjamin mailed this to me years ago." William turned toward her in surprise. "You still have it?" She nodded. "Always." Her voice softened. "I never stopped carrying it." Emma looked at the letter. Something about it felt important. Victoria carefully unfolded the page. The handwriting was unmistakably Benjamin's. She smiled sadly as she read several lines silently to herself. Then she looked up at Emma. Tears shimmered in her eyes. "There is something in here you should hear." Emma felt her heart quicken. Noah climbed onto his chair and leaned closer. Even he sensed that the letter mattered. Victoria took a slow breath. Around them, the ballroom noise seemed to fade once again. The paper trembled slightly in her hands. "Benjamin wrote this shortly before we lost contact." William stared at the letter. He had not seen it in years. Victoria swallowed hard. Then she began reading. The first sentence made Emma freeze completely. Because Benjamin had written about a future family he hoped to have someday. And the description sounded exactly like Noah. Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she held the letter beneath the warm ballroom lights. The paper was old, softened by time and years of careful handling. Around them, guests continued moving through the gala. But for Emma, William, Victoria, and Noah, the rest of the world had faded into the background. Only Benjamin's words mattered now. Victoria took a slow breath and began reading aloud. "If I ever have a child one day, I hope he grows up believing kindness is more important than status. I hope he asks questions. I hope he loves adventure. And I hope someone teaches him to never look down on another person." Victoria's voice weakened. Emma felt tears forming instantly. Noah listened carefully, even though some of the words were beyond his understanding. William lowered his eyes. The description sounded less like a wish and more like a portrait of the little boy sitting beside them. Victoria continued reading. "I hope he likes airplanes. I hope he laughs often. And I hope he never doubts that he is loved." Noah looked up immediately. "I like airplanes." The simple observation broke everyone's composure. Victoria laughed softly through tears. William smiled and shook his head. Emma pressed a hand against her chest. The resemblance had always been there. The stories, the drawings, the pendant. But hearing Benjamin's own words transformed coincidence into certainty. Victoria carefully folded the letter and returned it to its protective sleeve. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Noah climbed onto his chair and looked directly at Victoria. "Was my dad nice?" The question was so pure that it silenced everyone again. Victoria knelt beside him. "Very nice." Noah considered that. "Like my mom." Victoria smiled. "Yes." Then she thought for a second. "A lot like your mom." Emma laughed softly while wiping away tears. The answer seemed to satisfy Noah completely. He nodded and returned to examining the silver pin. William watched the exchange with growing emotion. Earlier that evening, Emma and Noah had been strangers. Now they felt connected to memories he had carried for years. He looked toward Emma. "Why did you come tonight?" Emma seemed surprised by the question. "To work." William smiled. "No, I mean why this event?" Emma glanced toward Noah. "Benjamin cared about this foundation. After he was gone, I tried to attend when I could. It made me feel close to him." Victoria's eyes filled again. Even after everything she had learned, Emma's answer moved her deeply. She had not come seeking recognition. She had not come seeking money. She had not even known the Carter family would be there. She came because she loved Benjamin. That realization changed something inside Victoria. Around them, a few guests had begun noticing the emotional conversation. Quiet whispers spread through nearby tables. Yet nobody interrupted. Something about the scene felt too personal and too meaningful. Noah suddenly looked toward the stage where another auction item was being presented. Then he looked back at the paddle he had accidentally picked up earlier. "Is that why everyone got excited?" he asked. The question made William laugh. "In a way, yes." Noah grinned proudly. "I helped." Victoria smiled warmly. "More than you know." The little boy seemed pleased with that answer. As he sat back down, the silver pendant slipped into view again beneath the ballroom lights. Victoria looked at it one more time. Then she looked at Emma. For years, she believed her family had lost Benjamin forever. Tonight, she understood something important. They had not lost everything. Part of him had been sitting in this ballroom all along. And now there was only one thing left to do. Not to prove the truth. The truth was already clear. What remained was deciding what kind of future they would build together. The final auction item of the evening was being presented when something far more valuable was quietly unfolding away from the stage. Emma sat beside Noah while Victoria and William remained close, no longer feeling like strangers. The ballroom still glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. Guests still applauded generous donations. Yet for the 4 people gathered near the staff section, the night had become about something money could never purchase. Family. Noah continued examining the silver pin and pendant side by side. Every few moments he smiled as though discovering the connection all over again. Victoria watched him carefully. The more time she spent with him, the more familiar he felt. Not because he replaced Benjamin. No one could do that. But because pieces of Benjamin lived on in ways she never expected. Emma noticed the look in her eyes. It was not ownership. It was gratitude. Gratitude for a second chance she never believed would come. William glanced toward the stage and then back at Emma. "You know," he said softly, "Benjamin used to talk about building a life that mattered more than business." Emma smiled. "That sounds like him." William nodded. Most people thought he was unrealistic. Noah looked up immediately. "What does unrealistic mean?" Everyone laughed. Victoria leaned closer. "It means believing something good can happen even when other people think it cannot." Noah considered that carefully. Then he smiled. "I like that." Victoria smiled back. So did your father. A comfortable silence settled between them. Not awkward. Not uncertain. Simply peaceful. The kind of silence that comes when people stop trying to prove anything and start accepting what is already true. After a few moments, Victoria reached into her purse one last time. This time she removed a small wooden box. The box was worn from age, but beautifully cared for. Emma immediately sensed its importance. Victoria opened it carefully. Inside rested an old silver compass. The metal had softened over time, but the engraved symbol on the cover remained clear. The same symbol. Noah's eyes widened. "Wow." Victoria smiled. "This belonged to your father." The little boy stared at it in amazement. Emma felt tears gathering again. Victoria held the compass gently. "Benjamin carried it everywhere when he was young." William laughed softly, even when he had no idea where he was going. That earned another round of quiet laughter. Victoria knelt beside Noah and placed the compass into his hands. The child accepted it carefully, understanding instinctively that it mattered. "Are you sure?" Emma asked softly. Victoria nodded. "It belongs with him." Noah opened the compass and watched the needle settle. "It always finds the way?" he asked. Victoria smiled through tears. "Yes." Noah looked up. "Then I will keep it safe." Emma could no longer hide her emotion. For years she had feared Noah would grow up with unanswered questions. Tonight, those questions had begun finding answers. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But enough. More than enough. The auction eventually ended. Guests began gathering their coats and saying goodnight. The ballroom slowly emptied. Yet none of them seemed eager to leave. Finally, as they walked toward the exit together, Noah reached for both Emma's hand and Victoria's hand at the same time. Neither woman expected it. Both smiled. Outside the hotel, city lights reflected against the night sky. Cars passed in the distance. Life continued exactly as it always had. Yet everything felt different. William looked at Noah. Victoria looked at Emma. And Emma looked at the family Benjamin had hoped his son would know one day. Nobody spoke for a moment. There was no need. The truth had already found its place. A little boy had picked up an ordinary object at a charity gala. What he found instead was something far greater. Not wealth. Not status. Not privilege. He found the people who had been missing him all along. And sometimes that is how destiny works. Quietly. Patiently. Waiting for the right moment to bring people home.